Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new here. My name is Hiba, and here on my channel I cover recent missing person cases. If you're into that type of content, please subscribe. I would really appreciate it. Today's video is probably going to be longer than my usual videos, just because there are so many details in this case, and it's not as new as many of the cases that I cover. Today I want to talk about Cassie Sheetz. Many of you already know and follow Cassie's story. In fact, some of you probably found my channel through my Cassie videos. But Cassie's case is finally starting to gain some traction, so I figured I would make this video to compile all the information that we have about her disappearance. For those of you who are interested, there is a Facebook group for Cassie. I'm a part of it, and so are her family members, and basically we provide updates and talk about the facts of the case there. Members of that Facebook group have done a fantastic job of sharing Cassie's story, and they were instrumental to getting her case off the ground again. In this video, I want to go over what allegedly happened that day and highlight some discrepancies in the story. Then I want to tell you about an event that occurred in 2020 that involves the same men that Cassie was with when she disappeared. I also want to provide some updates and information about an upcoming search party. With all of that being said, let's go ahead and get into it. Cassie Sheetz was 24 years old when she disappeared from Spruce Knob in Pendleton County, West Virginia. On March 11th, Cassie supposedly went hiking on a Huckleberry Trail with her two male friends, Grant Sager and James Brill II. The two boys made it off the trail, but Cassie never did. Initially, all three hikers were reported missing. However, Grant and James were both found on the morning of the 12th after allegedly spending the night searching for Cassie. According to the two, here's what happened. On Thursday, March 11th, the group set out to Spruce Knob because Cassie allegedly wanted to show them something. They have yet to clarify what she supposedly wanted to show them. After entering the trail, the trio became separated. Here's what they claim happened. Grant heard a noise and went off to go see what it was, leaving James and Cassie alone together. James claims that he fell or tripped, and that Cassie continued ahead of him. According to James, he asked Cassie to wait up, but by the time that he was able to muster up the strength to get back up, Cassie was nowhere to be seen. Here I'm going to include a screenshot from James to Cassie's mother, Arlene, that details what happened that day according to him. After he got up and was unable to find Cassie, James claims that he spent hours lost on the trail. All this time, Grant had supposedly been off trying to figure out what the noise was that he heard. After this, Grant apparently made it off the trail and made his way back to the vehicle, which we've now learned is James's car. He expected to find Cassie and James here, but obviously they weren't there. According to Grant's mother, he then broke the rear back window to get into the car since it started to rain. He claims that the keys were with Cassie. However, text messages make me question whether this actually happened or not. Texts from Cassie show that the back window had already been broken for at least a week at that time, so I'm not sure why he lied and claimed that he broke it. After waiting at the car for approximately 2 hours, James also emerged from the trail. However, Cassie was not with him. James supposedly found his way off the trail, and he figured that Cassie made her way off as well, and that they would all meet at the vehicle. Once Grant found out that Cassie was lost, he apparently told James to stay with the vehicle while he re-entered the trail to search for her. According to Grant's mother, Grant fell when he went back to search for Cassie. She stated that he hurt his hip and broke a bone in his foot. However, according to what law enforcement have told Cassie's family, Grant did not have any injuries. While Grant searched, James was waiting at the car as directed. By this point, it was Friday morning, and it had been several hours since Grant re-entered the trail. A car in the area noticed James and his vehicle, and they were the ones who ended up placing the call for help. Once law enforcement and searchers arrived, they were quickly able to locate James. Again, he had just been waiting with the vehicle. Grant, on the other hand, was still in the woods allegedly searching. So at first, not only were individuals searching for Cassie, but for Grant as well. He was eventually found, but not in the way that you would expect. A forestry agent noticed Grant and asked him if he needed help. Grant supposedly responded that he was fine and that he had left his car on the mountain and was trying to make it back into town. After realizing that Grant was one of the individuals being searched for, the forestry agent notified police who were still on the mountain searching. After this, Grant was picked up and asked for his account of details. Grant's response to the forestry agent doesn't match his original story that he went back in to search for Cassie. If that were true, why wouldn't he just be honest with the forestry agent? You would think that he would want their help. He also didn't stop to ask anyone else for help. Several members of the search party had passed him, and he never flagged anyone down. At that point, Grant and James had both been located, but Cassie had not. It's now over 6 months later, and Cassie remains missing. Since then, Grant has been arrested for unrelated substance charges. He has refused to take a polygraph or lie detector test and has retained a lawyer. James, on the other hand, did agree to the polygraph and passed. Unfortunately, as many of you probably know, polygraphs are not reliable and they're rarely admissible in court. We still have no answers about Cassie's whereabouts. There are some obvious questions regarding the boys' story about what supposedly happened that night, starting with their initial reason for going to Spruce Knob. Like I previously mentioned, the boys claim that Cassie wanted to show them something, but they've never indicated what it was. First and foremost, while Cassie enjoyed the outdoors, she wasn't a hiker. She probably wouldn't have suggested this activity. She also wasn't familiar with the area, despite what they've claimed. The next question is in regards to the trio's separation. If you recall, the story is that Grant heard a noise and went off to see what it was. This really doesn't make sense to me. The group was hiking and it was getting darker out. It doesn't really make sense to separate from the group, especially because Grant allegedly isn't familiar with the area. James' account that he fell and that Cassie continued on without him is also questionable. Although it's true that Cassie does hate the dark and that she probably wanted to get off the trail, she probably would want to be with someone else if it were dark outside. It also doesn't make sense for her to leave him behind if he actually fell like he claims he did. If you're hiking with a friend and they fall or trip, you're probably going to stop and help them. Even if Cassie did continue ahead, I don't believe that she would have gotten very far. It was dark out, and like I said, it's not like she was a hiker. Also, it's not like James was down for an hour or more. Another problem with their story is what I referenced earlier regarding the back window. If it is true that they wanted to access the vehicle and did not have the keys, why would Grant break the back rear window? That doesn't make sense. You would think that he would break a side window and unlock the doors that way. It would make much more sense to do that rather than break the rear window and climb in through the car. However, like I mentioned, there are also texts that prove that the back window was already broken. So why would they lie about having to break it that night? Like I mentioned, Grant's actions don't align with his story that he went back onto the trail to search for Cassie. He did not indicate needing any help despite being asked, and he also didn't flag anyone down. Instead, like I said, he claimed that he just wanted to make it back to town. We also know that Grant changed his clothes at some point that night. James shared a photo that the group had taken that day while they were hiking. Apparently, the phone was put in a tree to capture this photo. As you can see, Grant is wearing a gray shirt, camo pants, and a black hat. However, when Grant was ultimately located, he was wearing something completely different. According to a passerby on the mountain that day, he was wearing a short-sleeved black Zoo York t-shirt, khaki pants, and what appears to be a different black hat. In this picture, we see that Grant has his arms inside the t-shirt, probably for warmth. Unlike the sports cap that Grant was seen wearing in the first photo of the trio, it appears that he changed into a beanie in this photo. Why and when would Grant change his clothes? When it started to rain, he claims to have broken the window in order to access the car. This means that his clothes wouldn't have been wet and that he wouldn't need to change them, at least not for that reason. He then supposedly re-entered the trail to search for Cassie, and as far as we know, he never returned to the vehicle. So even if it's true that he fell while searching for Cassie and gotten his clothes muddy, he never made it back to the car. So where did he get the clothes to change into? Also, his first set of clothes that he was wearing that day have never been recovered, as far as I know. Aside from the discrepancies in their story, We also know that the boys have a sketchy background, especially Grant. Grant and Cassie were previously dating. During their relationship, Grant regularly threatened her and had done so several times in front of others. It seems like they had a turbulent relationship, and like I said, they weren't together at the time of her disappearance. Grant is also well known for manufacturing and selling. He had previously been arrested for this. Like I alluded to earlier, there was also another event that involved both Grant and James about a year prior to Cassie's disappearance. Not only were these two men the last two to allegedly see Cassie, they were also the last two to see Sierra Sager. Sierra and James have a baby together, and she was his fiancée. You may have noticed that Sierra and Grant share the same last name, and this is because they're actually cousins. On February 28th, 2020, Sierra supposedly drove out to the middle of nowhere late at night and took her own life in the front seat of her car. Shockingly, Cassie drove that very same car on the day that she disappeared. Sierra had last been with Grant and James before she allegedly did this. More specifically, I've heard that Grant was the last person she spoke to. Grant was also the person who found her, despite her not telling anyone where she was going. In my previous video regarding Sierra, I didn't have many details. It turns out that the angle of the shot is suspicious and that it doesn't fall in line with her doing it to herself. Not only is this extremely suspicious on its own, but a few months ago, James shared some notes and messages from Sierra's phone that she allegedly wrote leading up to the incident. However, many have pointed out that the way these notes were written does not sound like Sierra. Friends and family don't believe that she wrote it. This includes her own sister Olivia, who brought up the fact that police had Sierra's phone and never found any notes like this. If this is true though, why would James lie and say that it was written by her? Many of Sierra's family and friends question what happened that night, especially now. After learning about Cassie's disappearance and the potential of Grant and James being involved, many of her family members have come forward and voiced their concern. While it's possible, it seems like too much of a coincidence that both these women were last with Grant and James before they disappeared. When it comes to updates, the investigation into Cassie's disappearance has mostly stalled. Authorities have not been able to ping Cassie's phone since it's Wi-Fi only. However, according to her last known Google location, she was in Riverton, which is about half an hour away from Spruce Knob. What this tells us is that we can't know for certain that Cassie ever made it to Spruce Knob, which is something that many people have already theorized. The whole story and going there may have been to throw investigators off. At this time, Grant is in the West Virginia Division of Corrections, and he continues not to speak. James claims that the two had nothing to do with Cassie's disappearance. Cassie's 25th birthday was in July. Around that same time, a billboard went up in Elkins, West Virginia to help share her story and raise awareness that she's still missing. Like I said, Cassie's case seems to finally be getting some much needed attention. Her family and many others are advocating for her and will continue to do so until she's found. I also want to share that a search party has been organized for October 3rd at Spruce Knob. If you're able to, or if you're in the area, consider helping out. I'll include the link to the Facebook group where you can sign up for the search party and where you can find out more information. I'll also link the family's GoFundMe, which has been established to help hire a private investigator. Like I said, Cassie is still missing. She has brown hair and blue eyes. She's 5'3" and weighs approximately 120 pounds. At the time of her disappearance, Cassie was believed to be wearing a hoodie and camouflage pants. If you have any information about Cassie's whereabouts, the number for you to call will be down in the description below. My email will also be below. If you have any questions about something specific, I recommend that you watch my other videos about Cassie since there's a lot of information to cover here. Thank you so much for watching this video. Like I said, I know many of you have been following Cassie's case since the beginning, and your support is appreciated more than you know. To keep up with updates and hear about other cases, go ahead and subscribe, and I hope to see you in my next one.